From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 99. I'm excited for this podcast because we have a longtime CSP athlete who's got a great story to tell. He went through a pretty significant injury during his minor league career. He had a really remarkable major league debut, and he's also a new author, so someone who has a lot of perspective across a number of different aspects of the sport, from the college recruiting process to being drafted multiple times by multiple organizations and playing at several different schools. So I think he's got a lot of wisdom to share, and certainly has spoken to a little bit to how he's evolved as a pitcher and what he's worked hard at to become what he is today. So really good show coming up, and I think you'll like it. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. I'm an avid user of Athletic Greens myself, in spite of the fact that I tend to be a supplement minimalist. To me, this is a product that is much more like whole food nutritional insurance as opposed to a true supplement. The ingredients have been carefully selected at the highest quality, most natural source. You get essential vitamins and minerals, digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and that's the zero compromise approach from the company. It's plant-based, sourced from whole foods at the highest qualities. You won't find harmful chemicals, artificial colors or flavors, preservatives, or added sugar. Really, it's perfect for folks who are gluten and dairy-free, paleo, keto, vegan-friendly, great for people who are intermittent fasting, all that fun stuff. Personally, I love it for obviously our athletes who don't get enough nutritional benefits from fruits and vegetables because they don't eat enough. So it's a way to kind of plug in holes in diets. But also, I really like it for our college and professional athletes who may have complex travel schedules where quality food options aren't always at hand. On a personal level, I'm a husband, father of 3, and an entrepreneur. We split our time between 2 states, and I'm also still an avid lifter. So life is inherently crazy, and it can be stressful, and sleep deprivation is definitely something that we encounter. So I rely on Athletic Greens for part of my immune support, and believe firmly that it's made a big difference in keeping me healthy in spite of how crazy our lifestyle is. They've got a great offer in place. If you head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey, they'll get you 20 free travel packets with your purchase. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you can claim your special offer. Today's guest is a right-handed pitcher who grew up in California and was drafted in the 24th round of the 2010 MLB draft by the Tampa Bay Rays. He decided not to sign, instead attending the University of Arizona, and as you'll learn in this interview, he attended 4 separate colleges in 4 years. He was drafted by the Reds in the 38th round, Cubs in the 14th round, and Cardinals in the 9th round, ultimately signing with the Cardinals in 2014. He worked his way through the minor leagues, and on June 11th, 2018, he was called up to the big leagues. In his MLB debut, he threw 7 no-hit innings against the Reds. At the time of this recording, he's made 46 MLB appearances, including 22 starts, and struck out 143 hitters in 135 innings. Please welcome to the show, Daniel Ponce de Leon. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me on here.
No worries at all. So I've known your story from afar for quite some time, like the highs and the lows. But I think it'd be cool maybe to start from the beginning so that our listeners have a little bit of a better insight as to where you started from. So let's talk about you as a high school pitcher. You were drafted out of high school as a commit to the University of Arizona. So there was definitely some talent there. But if you had to look back and give the scouting report on Daniel as a high school pitcher, what would you say?
I would say that he was a careless guy who was raw. I was always in love with football. My passion was there, and then whenever baseball rolled around, I just played. And never really thought I was great until scouts started coming to the games, and coach kept putting me in the big games to pitch, and I was like, why am I doing that? And I go out there and I just try to throw hard and throw everything as hard as I can, really, at home plate, and I ended up working out pretty well. But I was raw, didn't know what a 2-seam was, didn't think pitchers actually threw changeups, didn't really know too much about baseball, to be honest.
Interesting. So when you say raw, was it a scenario of like you were a very like good athlete who just happened to have a baseball in his hand, or was it just raw in the sense that you had refined the baseball like skill aspect of it, but no one had taught you how to hold grips and things like that? How would you was it baseball specific, I guess, or was it mentality?
Probably both. I threw a four seam, but in my head I called it a sinker because I would just throw it on this. I would have my fingers on the side and hopefully it sank. And then the curveball I threw was pretty much a two seam grip, and I would throw it like a football. That's how my dad taught me. You know, those are the cues.
Hey, it worked, right? It got you drafted. You were headed to a Division I program, But I guess my curious question, first and foremost, why was college the path for you? Was it abundantly clear? Was it a hard decision for you?
It was a tough decision. No one in my family has any professional experience in sports. We had a scout draft me, and he was very welcoming, good person, and we just didn't know. We jumped through a lot of hoops with them too, but my visit to University of Arizona, we were just blown away. The coach told us everything we needed to hear, and I mean, the facility was awesome, this campus was awesome, and I didn't mind school. I like going to school, so I thought that was a good route for us.
I like it. So you get to the University of Arizona, and I think it was 3 innings that you pitched there, correct? And it led to you bouncing around a fair amount. So tell the story of maybe those circumstances. Also maybe the lessons that you learned all the way from how you wound up with the Cardinals years later.
Okay. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
a little bit,
we got
but
all the time in the world.
well, Arizona was a tough spot for me. Only got 3 innings of work and somehow burned my freshman year. So going into the offseason, the head coach calls me in the office. We had the end of year meeting, and he tells me, "Hey, we're looking at you to be our Sunday starter next year, and we like this and this about you, that." So then I'm like confused now, like what just happened? And then halfway through the summer, I get the call from the Arizona coach saying we're not renewing your scholarship. So I had to move on. And the next day, I got tons of calls from D2s, D3s, junior colleges. And I ended up settling on a junior college near my house called Cypress uh, Junior College. And it's about 15, 20 minutes from my house. So I was able to live at home, which was nice. And I was able to pitch there. And my pitching coach there taught me the cutter that I still throw to this day. And it was a good experience for me. I was able to be on starts. I started every start, didn't miss any, and pitched well. And that's where University of Houston found me, and we were still comfortable going back to school. So I went to University of Houston. They cleaned house pretty much, so they had all their weekend spots open. I ended up winning the Friday night guy and pitched the whole year there. Ended up getting drafted by the Cubs that year. And that was when I finally decided it's time to be a professional. So then I go get the physical from the Cubs in Mesa, Arizona. End up failing a physical on my ulnar nerve, which I had no issues prior. It was just out of the blue once again. And so I go to return back to Houston, but then the NCAA deems me as a professional because I agreed to terms with the scout from the Cubs. So now I lost my amateur status.
Jeez.
So, so last but not least, I end up at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and the reason why I went there is because my pitching coach at Houston coached the pitching coach at Embry-Riddle, so that was that connection. And I thought if I was going to go to any school, I might as well go to a good NEIA school. They were ranked preseason ranked 3 in the nation, so I thought that would be a good place to go, and it was. That pitch coach there put me on a pretty good routine, and kind of some of those things that he put in me are still stuck in me to this day as well. And I pitched real well there, and I got drafted by the Cardinals.
Nice. All right. So the Cardinals situation rolls around, and I think we met up the first time. It was in the fall of 2015, maybe after your first full season for the Cardinals. What was the biggest adjustment for you going to pro ball? Obviously, you had been in 4 different college landscapes, over the course of those 4 years, and then you jump into your first year of pro ball. And pro ball, let's be honest, it's not really about continuity because you jump level to level. I guess as you're going through all of these like different dynamics, and effectively by the time I met you, it was probably 6 places, actually 7 places in 7 years when you take senior in high school all the way through.
Yeah.
At what point do you realize, like, hey, I've got to be my own best coach? I've got to figure out what works for me and all that. Did it take some time to figure that out?
My very first professional off season, I kind of stepped back and looked at everything, and I ended up pitching well my first professional season. But you look at the guys in the big leagues, they're throwing hard stuff, and I was 88, 92 guy, and I had pitches, but I just wasn't elite. So in my head, I was like, I just got to get stronger. So I started YouTubing videos and pretty much taught myself how to lift via YouTube because I wasn't a huge lifter. I just kind of got it done.
Mhm.
But then that's when I really invested in it, and that's when I saw a huge jump in my velo.
Interesting. And so let's talk about maybe the progression of you over the course of, um, the years in minor league baseball. Like certainly you talked about obviously getting bigger, stronger, and all that, but there were also some pitch mix, changes. You mentioned the cutter is kind of the same thing it is today, but there was also a period as you worked your way through minor league baseball where you banged the two seamer and went to just four seamer. So what was the rationale for the change and then maybe as a question 1A on that, what are the biggest adjustments and mental cues you had to have for yourself to make that change?
Yeah, I ever since I left high school, just threw the two seam the whole time. That was my only fastball. I never threw any four seam since. And 2017 or 18 rolls around, and they've always told me I was a high spin guy. High spin guys throw four seamers, and that was kind of when the spin hype has started getting bigger.
Mhm.
So there was one spring training game, and I was like, you know what, I'll throw one inning for you guys with this four seam, just to like kind of like rub it in the coach's face, like I don't really need it, and then. So I go out there and I grip the four seam and I'm blowing doors away. I'm like, wow, this is actually something here. And so then I ended up sticking with it. And I mean, now that's my only fastball I throw, and I can't really throw a two seam anymore for some reason. But the mental cue was, I think it helped me stay in line better because in the two seam in my head, I think I started crossfiring a little more. I've been trying to wrap it, I guess, or sink it more by getting on the side and stepping across my body, and it just threw a lot of things off.
Mhm.
And it's still that some of that stuff is still stuck in me, and it's still working it out of me. But the four seam, the mental cue was pretty much just drive it through the catcher, and with that cue, it gave it lift without without me trying to give it lift, I guess.
Mhm. And I'm also curious because you've always had the curveball, and you've even thrown it more, in recent years, working out of the pen some and all that. Were you always able to manipulate the baseball? Like we've talked with like Adam Ottavino and Mike Soroka, and those guys talk about like just like almost playing games with like manipulating the ball and creating spin, in their early teenage years. Was that something you always had? Was it something that you went through multiple iterations of it, especially as the balls changed from high school to college and college to pro?
Yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster. Back in high school, I was able to like shape different things unintentionally. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it. And as you step up a level, the seams go down. So then there's that learning curve. Then you get used to it, and then you go up another level, and the balls change, and then finally you get to the big leagues, and now it's a battle. You're trying to spin a cue ball, really.
Yeah, I've heard that, over and over from guys is that adjustment minor league to the big leagues is one of the most pronounced changes they see. Um, you were off to a really impressive start in 2017 and unfortunately you were hit by a line drive. And I think it was something that was, the casual baseball fan heard about it and probably saw the video. But not many people understood just how serious it was. And being honest, like we were working together at the time and, I heard about it. It was terrible, but I didn't realize how dire the condition was. So maybe tell us the story and talk about like what people from afar didn't really know about that.
Well, okay. 2017 May 9th, pitching against the Iowa Cubs in AAA and day game, Kids Day. And second inning rolls around. I'm throwing two seams at the time, and I'm facing a left-handed hitter, Victor Carantini, who's a pretty good bat to ball guy. He could hit pretty good. And catcher calls two seam down away, and I start two seam middle. And it didn't break down and away; stayed in the middle. Caratini drove it right back up the middle and struck me in the temple. And probably knocked me out for a few seconds, but after that, I came to, the trainer ran out, and I was able to answer, the simple questions they asked me, like, what's my name? What's my birthday? How old am I? What year is it? And I was able to answer all these questions. But, the way I was answering it, I don't think the trainer liked.
Mhm.
So he ended up calling the stretcher up, putting me in the ambulance, and they brought me into the hospital. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, why are we doing all this? It didn't seem too bad. I played football and got, rung up a bit, and seemed something similar until I was in the ambulance, and stuff started getting a bit woozy for me,
Mhm.
like spinning and stuff, and started feeling real sick. And then that's when I finally thought, this is probably pretty bad, and got one prayer off, and then a few memories left. And next thing you know, I'm laying in bed talking to my dad, and I come to find out that I had a epidural hematoma, which is a bleed between the brain and the skull, and I could have died.
Mhm. So it was just a matter of time until the swelling kind of kicked in and got things pronounced worse.
Yeah, pretty much. Once the brain started shifting over and pressing against the skull, that's when things got real bad, and they had to pretty much take off the right side of my skull and relieve pressure and stop the bleeding. And once that was relieved a bit, they were able to replace my skull back on with some titanium plates and hold it back on. And the worry was that if it re-swelled again, then they would have to remove my skull, and I would have a mesh lining as my skull instead of my skull, which
Eesh.
would be a very bad thing because then I would have, a disability.
Absolutely. Now, talk timelines. Like you're obviously, those are acute surgeries, but what was the period of time you were on the shelf in the hospital and rehabbing and all that?
In the hospital, I was in ICU for a little over 2 weeks, and then I went into inpatient room for like 2 or 3 days, and they sent me through a blast of tests and difference between like physical and mental things and showering on my own, and I was able to pass all those, and finally around the 3 week mark, I was able to fly home to Florida, and then so to resume any physical activity, my brain swelling would have to go down.
Mhm.
And to rehab a brain, you can't really do anything
Yeah.
like you would do an arm, leg, whatever.
Mhm.
So all you can do is sit there. So what I did was, kind of research and see, what can I do to help speed up this process. And what I got out from it was really, if you could have a healthy body where it doesn't really need to heal anywhere else, we could focus healing on the brain. So I cleaned up the diet and everything else, and on the 3 month mark exactly, I got my scan and was cleared for physical activity with no brain shift. I was back to neutral.
Yeah, and in hindsight, it was a very, I don't want to say it was a normal off season. We progressed a lot slower, but looking back, that 17-18 off season, we were able to do way more stuff than in hindsight I would have ever expected. So it was a testament to a lot of the changes you made. But I'm curious, beyond just the physical components, like talk about the mental side of things. Was it a hurdle to get back, onto the mound, or were there other big lessons that you took from it?
Um, the mental part was in those 3 months, not being able to do anything was a bit tough. You just had to sit there and wait. And so, I had to pick up new things, started reading more,
Mhm.
started doing other things more, walking more, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
But to get back on the mound was never a problem for me. I don't know why, but I've always had that belief that I was fine.
Mhm.
And when you get on the mound, you just got to be in attack mode, because if you're not, then that's when you get those liners right back up the middle again. So you got to stay in that attack mode. And so I don't think I ever feared getting back on.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a cool story. Also, months later, so you made your MLB debut in 2018. 7 no-hit innings in your debut, and it was also the start of a very effective rookie year. I'm curious, maybe it's perspective for some of this experience, but what allowed you to be successful early on, in the big leagues when you first came up? What made you throw, or what allowed you to throw 7 no-hit innings in the first go round when other guys struggle in an MLB debut and walk the house or don't make it out of the first inning?
Um, well, I'm a man of faith, so that whole off season, starting from the point of getting injured up till then. I was digging deeper and deeper, reading the Bible daily and praying daily, and made sure I knew where I was going to go when I died, because I was not real sure when I got injured, but I'm pretty sure now, very sure now. But so I pray before the game, saying, give me some peace and focus. And when I got on that mound, that was probably one of the most peaceful games and the most focused I ever been on a mound.
And what allowed you to stick, in the big leagues? I mean, everyone talks about it's hard making the big leagues. It's even harder to stay in the big leagues. What adjustments were you finding that you had to make to be a regular big leaguer in the months that followed?
To be in the big leagues, you have to be good at something, and what I figured out was, my fastball was pretty good, so I used my fastball, and I force hitters to hit it, and if they start actually showing that they could hit it, then that's when I could start bringing in some other off speed stuff. But I try to perfect the fastball, I guess you could say, and I throw it as hard as I can.
I like that. And, it's interesting. Fastball usage across the game is down, but you're still throwing it over 60% of the time as a starter and over 80% of the time as a reliever. Like, what makes you so confident in your fastball in an era, where secondary stuff isn't playing up? Is it just knowing those numbers of like what hitters do to it and how success rates work? Or is it also maybe knowing that, the way that you position your fastball in your repertoire makes everything else play off a little bit better? Is it a little bit of everything?
Um, well, first is like when I get the grip of a baseball, I could tell you before the pitch even leaves my hand if it's going to be good or not. I don't know why. It just feels good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really think about it, you have the least amount of time to react against a fastball as opposed to any other off speed, because it is the fastest pitch coming
Mm-hmm.
towards home. So um, that's another reason why. And I wasn't really huge into the metrics, but the metrics guys came to me and showed me what my fastball was, and they showed it was pretty good. So I thought, if it's that good, maybe I can make it a little bit better. So I started tweaking with different grip, not different grips, but different angles of the grip, I guess, and different ways of throwing it. But nothing really beats the the idea of just throwing it through the catcher.
I like it. A good external focus cue as well. I'm curious, you bounce back and forth between starting and relieving. You're relieving a little bit more now, but what are some of the biggest adjustments you've had to make on this front? Has it been, changing when you lift or how much you lift? Has it been more on how you manage your bullets pregame and the throwing side of things? What's been the biggest struggle going from starting to relieving, if at all?
Yeah, there was a bit of learning and still is. Definitely lifts. It turned from focused upper and lower and recovery lifts to kind of total body lifts. And I was never afraid to lift before throwing anyways. I actually enjoy lifting before I throw. It gets the body nice and warmed up. So
Mhm.
I was okay with that. But also the hard part for me was the throwing. I love throwing, but as a reliever, if you throw a ton before the game and then you go and sit for a long time, then you have to warm back up, you just don't feel as great. So um, you just kind of have to replan the way you throw, as opposed to when you're a starter, you could, after you pitch, you have 4 days between to really get some good throwing in before your next start.
I like that. And maybe let's talk about the book as well. So it's called One Line Drive, and obviously it's impacted by your experience of being hit by the line drive. But what led you to write it, and then also what audience do you think it benefits the most?
Well, at first, my agent Brian Grieper, he brought the idea to me about writing a book, and I kind of shunned it off. And he kind of kept subtly bringing it up, and I didn't really think about it too much. But then it was mainly the fans reaching out,
Mhm.
um, that they said how much they've been impacted, and even people close to me said how much they've been impacted. I'm like, well, if people are actually impacted by this, and this is something I could talk and write about, and I could bring God into this and introduce people to God, or bring them closer to God, or affect someone's life help them know who Jesus is, then I'm all in on this book. So that's the reason why I wrote it.
And I've done this a couple times. Writing books is not easy. I'm curious, were you a natural for it, or was it something that you struggled with? I know you had a co-author that helped along with it, but this is not easy to drop these things up. I have a lot of respect for you for doing this. I had a lot of respect for you for everything you've done, but particularly with 2 young kids at home and all that. Was it hard?
Um, it was somewhat hard, especially talking about yourself, and then you even got to talk about the bad things about yourself to really show who you are, and so it was a little bit hard, but the people I worked with are amazing. Tom Zenner, the guy who co-wrote the book, he did hours of interviewing many different people, and he put together a good piece, and I was able to review it, and all the facts are true, which is great. And also the group that we have that help edit,
Mhm.
Brian Grieper and Jeff and Jan, they were really good at this, and they actually handled a lot of the work, and they
Mhm.
kept me out of some of the nuances. So that group together was a powerhouse.
That's awesome. And it's also available as an audiobook. So I crush a lot of my reading these days. So you can go to audible.com and get it. But OneLineDrive.com is the website. And then it's also, available in Amazon or wherever books are sold elsewhere. As we get to the end here, we got to do a lightning round. That's how we always wrap things up. So we're going to start with, what would your advice to a teenage Daniel Ponce de Leon be?
Oh, man. Um, I think take lifting more seriously, but that's tough because you could lift wrong,
Yeah.
So
I, I like that. That's a good qualifying recommendation to America's youth.
yeah,
All right. Favorite teammate of all time?
that's a good one too. Man,
Can be any level. And you can pick more than one if you want to. A lot of guys do.
I don't know. It'd be so cliche if I said Adam Wainwright, right?
I mean, everything I've heard about Adam is phenomenal. So
He's a great guy, and
yeah.
he still could pitch like crazy, and he's an old man.
That's a
Look,
good answer. All right. So building on that, who are your favorite pitchers to watch in the game right now?
one is Adam Wainwright right now because he is, has older age, and he's out there pitching. He's throwing 4 different pitches. He just taught himself a changeup within the last year and a half, and he's out there throwing it, and he's getting guys out, and it's amazing. But if we're going to like elite stuff, Trevor Bauer, the pitches he throws are absurd. I don't know how he gets balls to move like that.
So another one interesting. Your wife Jen is a weight room rock star. She's a regular CSP athlete during spring training each year, and she's rounded up a lot of the Cardinals' girlfriends and wives. Um, how important is it to have a support system like that? Like I said, you have 2 young kids at home, and she's crushing and supporting you on training, nutrition, all that stuff. What has she meant to your development?
Oh, she's 80% of my development.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a big cooker,
Mm-hmm.
but she enjoys cooking, and she makes some good food. So that's like the very first step. Also, like anytime I need a partner to help me do anything, especially in your list where you
Mm-hmm.
have programmed, uh, manual resistance stuff. I have her watch the videos and then do them with me.
I'm telling you,
So she's my coach.
I was teeing it up for you. I wanted to give you a chance to thank your wife publicly. So, Jen, you're a rock star. We all think the world of you. And then last question, what's the next step for you to take in your development? What do you feel like you want to do better to be a big leaguer for many, many years to come?
Just be consistent, man.
Mm-hmm.
You go out there and it just lights out. Like I feel like no one could ever hit me.
Mm-hmm.
I step on the mound, no one could touch my whatever I'm throwing out there. And then I'll go out the next day. I'm like, oh, where's home plate?
Nice. Well, that's an admirable goal for everybody. Hey, this was outstanding. Really would encourage everybody to check out the book for sure. Folks can find you on Twitter. It's at _ PONCE 14. But again, but it's an outstanding read with lots of really important messages. Thank you very much for taking the time, man, and best of luck the rest of the way. We'll be cheering for you.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me on here. It was an honor.
You got it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.